Welcome to this video on tips for a successful PowerPoint presentation made specifically for ECS 310 Foundations in Typical Atypical Child Development. Please make sure you have viewed the example presentation before continuing with this video. Before designing this presentation, I carefully reviewed the assignment directions and the rubric. I used the suggested slide outline on the presentation directions to set up the slides and slide titles. The first slide, the title slide, should have the disability or inborn variation title, your full name, and Arizona State University. I then used the suggested slide outline and created 2 overview slides, 2 strategy slides, 2 resource slides, and a reference slide. I later adjusted this a little bit. I created titles for those slides based on the suggested slide outline. As I worked through the development of the presentation, I revised the titles and added slides when necessary, but I made sure I did not go over the recommended number for each section. The second slide is the beginning of the overview section. On this slide, I give the federal definition for giftedness. I chose this definition because definitions, services, and funding vary by state and school district. The federal definition was the most comprehensive available. The second page of the overview section is titled Key Indicators. In gifted education, indicators are usually referred to as characteristics, which I used as the subtitle. While there are many gifted characteristics and most can be verbalized in both positive and negative manners, I decided to use these 8 as fairly common. I also was sure to explain in the audio that students don't have to demonstrate all listed characteristics to be considered gifted. The next slide is the third and last slide in the overview section. I labeled it Areas of Concern. I chose 3 issues in gifted education that I felt were the most important to know about. I started with common myths because there are common misconceptions about what giftedness is that affects gifted students, their identification, and their services. Although I had much more to say about these concerns, I only listed them as titles with citations from the literature on the slide. Less words and the use of bullets make viewing PowerPoints presentations easier for the audience. Slide 5 begins the strategies section. Up to this point, I have chosen a picture from Creative Commons for each slide. Using Creative Commons ensures that I am not infringing on anyone's copyright. You do not need to have visuals on each slide, but should have at least 2 per section. The strategies I chose for families come from the literature, which I was careful to cite. Although they might be helpful to others, these strategies are recommended especially for gifted students. Because there were many strategies in the literature, I decided to do a second slide for families. These are related to home-to-school collaboration, while the slide before included strategies for family interaction outside of school or at home. This is the third slide in the strategy section. The strategies I chose for educators were broader in scope. I only used 3 bullets, but was able to add explanations and examples in the audio. Without the audio, these broad bullet points would not be clear enough to educators that are new to gifted education. The next 2 slides are the resources section of the presentation. Again, I only listed 3 resources. I also gave their web links. I added examples in the audio to further explain why these resources are recommended. On each of these pages, I chose 2 web pages and 1 book. Each resource includes a variety of useful link strategies and information for the specific audience, whether families or educators. Throughout the presentation, I was careful when choosing font, colors, sizes, and styles, as well as the backgrounds. I chose a theme with a dark background and kept the background consistent throughout. Since the background is dark, I chose light-colored fonts. I used 2 colors of fonts to differentiate between the titles, bullet points, and citations. The web links automatically turned pink when I typed them in. The pink was not very visible or easy on the eyes, so I changed them all to white. Again, on this slide, the audio explains more about why these resources are recommended for families by giving specific examples. The last 2 slides are my reference slides. I used APA guidelines to type out this list, as well as in-text citations throughout the presentation. Note that journal articles, books, and website citations are each written differently. Journal article references start with the author's last names and first initials, followed by the year of the publication in parentheses. Then the title of the article, the title of the journal, the volume and issue numbers, and finally the page numbers. Book references are simpler as there is only one title followed by the publishing company. When available, also include the article, chapter, or book's DOI. DOIs are digital object identifiers. I have not listed any DOIs on this reference list. Web pages are listed by title, date, and web link. Web pages that are up continuously and do not have a date are written with N period D period. After completing the slides, I typed in the notes section for each page. These notes were the script for my audio. I'm going to scroll back up to page 2, and if you look down at the bottom where my arrow is, you will see notes typed in the notes section. After typing in the notes, I reviewed the assignment directions and rubric to make sure that I met the requirements for each section, including the number of slides, number of visuals, titles, and content. I checked each slide to make sure there weren't too many words, that they were well laid out and easy to read. I made sure in-text citations were on each page. It's always a good idea to compare your work to the rubric section ranked proficient, or the highest section available. Once any needed revisions were made, I was ready to record audio. I chose to record audio clips separately for each slide. I went to Insert, Audio, Record Audio. You can then name the clip and record. I listened to each audio clip and re-recorded when needed. Once it sounded good, I made sure to trim the beginning and ends so as not to leave a lot of recorded time without words or without speaking. After recording audio for each slide, I decided to hide the audio icon by either placing it behind a picture or altering its transparency. Doing this helped keep the slide clear from clutter. This, though, is not a requirement for this assignment, but it is just an additional PowerPoint option. If the icon is hidden, it will still play when in slideshow mode. Thank you for taking time to view this video on tips for a successful presentation for class ECS 310. I hope you have found this helpful. Please feel free to email me with any questions at anani.vasquez@asu.edu.